Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the April 2021 meeting of the Pennsylvania Board of Game Commissioners. My name is Lori, and I will be moderating this session this morning. First thing I want to do is make sure that everybody can hear us. So in your GoToWebinar panel on the right of your screen, if you could either maybe raise your hand or jot me a note in the questions to let me know that your audio is working, that would be awesome. Oh, thank you. Okay, I see some notifications coming in there. Thanks so much. So if you have dialed in by phone, when we play the recordings of staff presentations, you might be prompted to use the audio on your device, and you're going to want to do that in order to hear the recordings of staff presentations. We've discovered that some devices don't support that audio recording, especially landlines. But if you get disconnected, don't panic. Everybody that's an attendee will receive a link to the recording, and we will also be uploading the recording to the Game Commission's YouTube channel sometime by early next week. As far as the agenda today, we're going to be starting the meeting with awards and staff reports. The board will then take up its prepared agenda. That agenda is available for download in your go-to panel on the right of the screen under the handouts tab. And there are also some floor amendments there. And then the meeting will conclude with new business. Much like our in-person board meetings, we will not be taking questions from the public during the meeting. Comments for the board can be emailed to pgccomments@pa.gov. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Board President Stanley Knick. Good morning, President Knick. The floor is yours. Go ahead and unmute to welcome your attendees.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to this working meeting.
All right. So we're going to begin with awards, and we're going to start off with AJ Garcia, our Hunter Trapper Education Administrator, and he is going to present the Outstanding Instructor of the Year nominations.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending. My name is AJ, and on behalf of the Bureau of Information and Education, Research and Education Division, Hunter Education Team, 1,800 plus and growing nearly every day, I would like to welcome you to the presentation of the 2020 calendar year Outstanding Instructor of the Year awards for each region in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Each year, we recognize instructors that have exercised the traits we hope every hunter, but especially our hunter-trapper education instructors, aspire to. Not only are these men and women very hardworking and selfless volunteers who give of their time because of the passion they hold for what we do as conservationists, they are educators with the tireless motivation to teach new Pennsylvania hunters and trappers, both young and old, the skills and knowledge required to pursue game responsibly, ethically, and legally. I would like to introduce you to our regional nominees for Outstanding Instructor of the Year and regional award winners. The Northwest Region's Outstanding Instructor of the Year is Emily Baroni. At age 18, Emily has been assisting with hunter-trapper education classes since the age of 12 and became a junior instructor at age 14. Since then, she has assisted at practically every class held in her county. She is very involved with hunting and shooting sports and is a valuable asset to the hunter-trapper education team. For the Southwest region, the Outstanding Instructor of the Year is David Gardner. David has been a member of our hunter-trapper education team for 15 years. He attends all classes held in his district and gives time over and above time spent in the hunter-trapper education classrooms. David even spent time in 2020 teaching in other venues that needed assistance. His dedication and hard work are instrumental in keeping the hunting tradition alive in the Commonwealth. From the North Central region, Mike Hobbins is that region's outstanding instructor of the year. Coach Hobbins lost his sight due to a hunting-related shooting incident while turkey hunting in 2010. Since 2016, he uses that debilitating event to instill responsibility and safety in new Pennsylvania hunters and trappers. An educator through and through, his story at each of his classes inspires students to make good choices when afield, and our hunter-trapper education team is enhanced by his membership. The South Central region awarded Carl Fox as that region's outstanding instructor of the year. A valued member of the hunter-trapper education team for more than 45 years, Carl has much experience and knowledge he imparts to new hunting, trapping students. Carl is his county's instructor coordinator and manages the logistics for every class in his county. He has logged 1,068 hours of class time and 81 hours of annual training time. With Carl as an instructor, new hunters and trappers receive the benefits that Carl brings to each and every class conducted because he spends the hours necessary to make classes happen as well as teaches. In the Northeast region, the outstanding instructor of the year is Steve Decker. Since 1988, Steve Decker has been teaching hunters and trappers both in and outside of the classroom. And when the pandemic changed the way we run this program, he sought out the opportunity to inform and educate, thus offering some normalcy to the youth in his area. The dedication that Steve brings to the team knows no bounds. Ralph Gambler is the Southeast region's outstanding instructor of the year. Having taught thousands of new hunters and trappers in his 42 years as an instructor with the hunter-trapper education team, Ralph's efforts and abilities so inspire his local team that the other instructors requested his nomination for the regional award. It is one thing to be noticed by your game warden and quite another to be recognized by your peers. The inspiration to and respect of other instructors are traits that make Ralph so valuable as an instructor team member. Each of these regional instructors of the year receive a fine commendation plaque, a pocket knife, a sharpener, and a lapel pin for their instructor uniform. And also they will receive a framed Working Together for Wildlife print. And from the ranks of these regional outstanding instructor of the year award winners is selected the statewide instructor of the year. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and have a great day.
Excellent. Okay, and up next we have Jason Dukoski. He is the director of the Bureau of Wildlife Protection, and he has several awards here he's going to present.
Good morning, commissioners, executive staff, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Dukoski. I serve as the Director of Wildlife Protection. It is my sincere privilege to formally congratulate the following people for their contributions to Pennsylvania wildlife. Northeast Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs Award. The Northeast Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs Award, or NACLAC, is an organization made up of chiefs and assistant chiefs from the states of Virginia to Maine, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Marine Fisheries Office of Law Enforcement, and Canadian provinces. NACLAC had their first official meeting in August 1942 right here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. As you can imagine, times were a little different back then. The main purpose of the meeting was to encourage cooperation among states in solving problems as they related to conservation enforcement. Some of the problems addressed during this meeting included undercover officer use, sale and transfer of deer, cooperation with the FBI, and gasoline and tire rationing. Since then, NACLAC continues to grow as a leader in conservation law enforcement. Annually, NACLAC recognizes an officer from each state for their outstanding contributions to fish and wildlife protection of our country's natural resources. On behalf of the Northeast Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs Association, the Board of Commissioners, the Executive Office, and the rest of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we'd like to recognize Kevin Anderson as the 2020 Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs Award winner. Shikar Safari Club International was founded in 1952 as a group of international hunters who joined together to exchange experiences and ideas about hunting. It started as a social hunting organization, but soon recognized its potential to do meaningful things in the area of conservation. In 1973, the Shikar Safari Club International Foundation was formed. Monies raised by the club members on the behalf of the club's foundation are used to carry on various conservation projects throughout the world. Shikar Safari Club International started presenting awards annually to wildlife law enforcement officers in all states, provinces, and territories in the United States and Canada in 1968. This highly prestigious award is given annually to a state officer whose efforts show outstanding performance and achievement among sworn conservation law enforcement personnel. On behalf of the Shikar Safari Club International, the Board of Commissioners, the Executive Office, and the rest of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we'd like to recognize Matthew Johnson as the 2020 Shikar Safari Award winner. Operation Game Thief Case of the Year. The Pennsylvania Game Commission's Operation Game Thief Case of the Year Award was developed to recognize a district game warden or deputy game warden that utilizes information obtained through the Operation Game Thief program to investigate and apprehend subjects that participate in wildlife crime that substantially impacts wildlife resources. The agency receives approximately 1,500 submissions each year through the Operation Game Thief program, making it one of the top 3 turn-in a poacher programs in the United States. Once a submission is received, it is reviewed by dispatchers and Bureau of Wildlife Protection staff. The average time for reception of the submission to the information being dispatched to the appropriate officer is approximately 20 minutes. The Operation Game Thief program is a successful, effective, and efficient program for the agency and reporting mechanism for the public to provide information to combat crimes against wildlife. On behalf of the Board of Commissioners, the Executive Office, and the rest of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we would like to recognize Eric Kelly as having the OGT Case of the Year. Outstanding Deputy of the Year. Each year, the regions have the daunting task of selecting one of their deputy game wardens for Outstanding Deputy of the Year award. The award is given to those deputies who go the extra mile in their participation in the following phases of Game Commission work: law enforcement, hunter education, sportsman club meetings, public access program, officer survival skills, small animal complaints, educational programs, landowner relations, and positive contributions to their community. I would like to recognize the following deputy game wardens as their region's Outstanding Deputy of the Year: Scott Klopfer, Northwest Region; Christian Shawcross, Southwest Region; Toby Allen, North Central Region; James Fitry, South Central Region; Edward Kravitz, Northeast Region; and Thomas Harrington, Southeast Region. On the afternoon of February 9th, 2021, at approximately 1400 hours, State Game Warden Randy Crago responded to an incident that was reported to the Northwest Region Office Dispatch Center of an individual driving on state game lands. Upon arriving at the scene, State Game Warden Crago could see that a vehicle had driven from a boat ramp onto a lake within State Game Lands 269 from the P3 parking area. From that same location in the parking area, Warden Crago observed the vehicle that had driven approximately 300 yards across the frozen lake. The front of the vehicle appeared to be broken through the shallow ice on the opposite bank on the other east side of the lake. State Game Warden Crago was able to make contact with State Game Wardens Andy Huser and Cody Jones, who happened to be in the vicinity. Information and Education Supervisor Jason Amory responded to this scene as well. The 4 officers all decided to attempt to cross the lake to assess this situation and to see if anyone needed help. Upon arriving at the scene of the stranded vehicle, it was determined that the vehicle was vacant. However, tracks in the snow leading from the vehicle off into the woods were visible. State Game Wardens Huser and Jones followed the tracks and discovered an individual in a severe hypothermic state with only shorts and a jacket on. The individual had run his vehicle out of gas and he was attempting to start a warming fire. Obvious signs of exposure and hypothermia were immediately noticed by the wardens. Both wardens used their jackets to cover and attempt to warm the individual. Both wardens had broken through the ice and were partially soaked. The wardens remained with the individual for 2.5 hours until units from the local fire department and emergency medical services could cross the lake. The 4 wardens and multiple first responders carried the individual, who was approximately 6 foot 5 inches tall and over 300 pounds, out of the woods onto the ice. The wardens and first responders broke through the ice multiple times, but they were ultimately able to load the individual into their utility vehicle. All responding personnel were able to accompany the individual back to an EMS vehicle where he was loaded and transported to receive medical treatment. As of the writing of this nomination, the individual was in stable condition.
And now some brief comments from Richard Kramer, the director in the Northwest region where these fine wardens serve.
This is Rich Kramer, the Region Director for the Northwest Region of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I'd like to congratulate State Game Wardens Andy Huser, Cody Jones, Randy Crago, and Information Education Supervisor Jason Amory on receiving the Pennsylvania Game Commission's Life Saving Award. Through heroism and at risk to their own life and safety, these 4 officers initiated a rescue of an individual who was suffering from hypothermia and near death after he had driven his car onto the ice at State Game Lands 269 in Crawford County. I'd like to congratulate these officers for a job well done, and I thank them for their service.
Dave Boston, the president of the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation, will now present their Officer of the Year Award.
Hello, my name is Dave Boston, and I am the president of the Pennsylvania State chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation. It is my honor today to present the Pennsylvania State Chapter Wildlife Conservation Officer of the Year Award to Avert Special Investigator Lawrence Hergenroder. His love of the outdoor, coupled with his dedication to Pennsylvania's great national resources, sets a high bar for conservation officers across our state. We are extremely grateful for Larry's professionalism, performance, and commitment to protecting wildlife and hunters in the Commonwealth for the past 18 years, and believe Larry is very deserving of the State Wildlife Conservation Officer of the Year Award. Thank you, Larry, for your service to this state.
All right, the board will now recognize Rob Miller. President Knick, sir, you may unmute.
All right, at this time, I would like to take a couple minutes to thank Rob Miller for more than 3 decades worth of service to the Commonwealth, to the sportsmen and women of Pennsylvania as he gets ready to retire this month. Currently, Rob serves as the Governor Wolf's advisory for hunting, fishing, and conservation, and has done so for the past 6 years. Rob also served in the same capacity for Governor Rendell and has spent nearly 2 decades working with the House of Representatives. Rob was the Executive Director of the House and Game Fisheries Committee and was also on the House Commerce Committee. Rob's passion for hunting, fishing has been more apparent throughout his term as he focuses on passing these traditions on to future generations. Rob was central in the creation of the Mentor Youth Program and worked for years with Governor's Youth Council to give the sportsmen and women of tomorrow a voice in conservation today. Rob, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and Pennsylvania Game Commission, we would like to thank you for your years of service. Wish you best and luck in your retirement. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir, for your service to Pennsylvania Wildlife. Next, we will have an update. Oh, so that concludes the awards. Now we're going to move into staff presentations. First up in the staff presentations is an update on the use of bat guano to test for the presence of COVID and other coronaviruses in North America. And this is presented by Iman Anis. She is part of our Wildlife Futures Collaborative.
Hello everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you the bat research studies that have been done and are ongoing in my lab through the collaboration of the Wildlife Futures Program, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and the PennVet. Let me start first by introducing myself. My name is Iman Anis, an assistant professor of microbiology at University of Pennsylvania and the section head of the molecular diagnostics and avian serology. In the following 8 to 10 minutes, I will talk about the use of bat guano to test for the presence of SARS coronavirus 2 or COVID-19 virus, as well as other coronaviruses in North American bats. I'm interested in this project because to date, the exact source of the COVID-19 virus has not been identified, and this virus may have originated in animals. And bats have been implicated as the primary reservoir of the virus. And this is because the closest relative to the COVID-19 virus is a bat coronavirus that was detected in horseshoe bats in China. Though there are many research studies have been done, we still have a limited information about the susceptibility of bats to SARS coronavirus infection. And since the pandemic hit in March 2020, and due to the potential, the zoonotic potential of this virus, there are many questions that arose about bats and COVID-19. Some of these questions like, do North American bats harbor the virus? Can I get infected from bats? Can rehabbers transmit the virus to a bat? Or even can rehabbers release bats under their care back into the wild? To help answering some of these questions and to help decision makers take actions and make decisions, we decided to develop and validate a real-time PCR panel for the detection of COVID-19 virus in bat guano. And we started evaluating this panel in April of 2020. And this panel includes two primer sets to target two different regions of the virus. Typically in PCR, you usually include one primer set to target one region of the pathogen or the virus. I chose to target two different regions of this virus to avoid false negative results due to potential genetic mutation of the virus. And as we all know, know that there are several new variants of the virus circulating across the globe. In June 2020, we completed the evaluation of the panel and was able to publish this study in the Journal of Veterinary Diagnostic Investigation. And in July of 2020, we received and tested 139 bad guano samples using the evaluated panel. And this map shows you the different rehabilitation facilities from which these samples were collected. As you see here, most of the samples were collected from Pennsylvania, and also we received some samples from Rhode Island. These samples were collected from different species of bats, and fortunately, all the tested samples have been negative for COVID-19 virus. And and actually, based on these results, the rehabbers were able to release the bat that were overwintered in their facility due to the pandemic. And these results show how this panel has been used by wildlife agencies to test bats and permit rehabber to release bats after receiving their care, as well accept new bat admission, and protect both bats and human from infecting each other with this deadly virus. This spring, we expected to test over 300 bad guano samples from different rehabilitation facilities across Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. In addition to test these samples for COVID-19 virus, we also screened these samples for other coronavirus. And we decided to do that because we know even before the pandemic, we knew that there are other coronavirus circulating in the United States in different animal species, including pets. And in general, that coronaviruses are highly prevalent and show great genetic diversity, making up almost 60% of all known alpha and beta coronavirus species. Unfortunately, there is a very limited information about the prevalence and the genotypes of coronavirus circulating among North American bats. And that's why we decided to screen these samples for other coronavirus using what's called pan coronavirus primers that target highly conserved region of the coronavirus gene 1b. And we detected only one positive samples out of the 139 tested samples, and the coronavirus detected in these samples belong to alpha coronavirus. As you can see here in this figure, the family coronavirus is divided into 4 different genera: alpha coronavirus, beta coronavirus, gamma coronavirus, and delta coronavirus. The COVID-19 virus belongs to the beta coronavirus genus. The coronavirus we detected here in Pennsylvania belongs to alpha coronavirus. This is not the first time for alpha coronavirus to be detected in North American bats. I believe that alpha coronavirus was detected before in a study that was done in either 2006 or 2007, in which they tested a good number of North American bats. I hope that this ongoing study will add information to the little that is known about the relationship between coronavirus and bats in North America. In addition to the samples that we received and will receive from different rehabilitation facilities. We received samples from the Maryland Zoo and the Elmwood Zoo, and we are going to test these samples for both the COVID-19 and other coronaviruses. I believe that continuous surveillance and molecular characterization of North America bat coronavirus are important to predict and mitigate future emergence of new coronaviruses. Aside from the pandemic and the coronavirus, I would like also to briefly talk about another important disease of pets, which is the white nose syndrome. White nose syndrome is a fungal disease that has killed millions of North American bats. And in collaboration with Greg Turner, who lead this project, and I believe that he will discuss this project in details with you. This study actually assessed the efficacy of polyethylene glycol that has been used as a potential treatment for white nose syndrome. And my lab has evaluated a real-time PCR to detect and quantify the fungal load of BD, the causative agent of white nose syndrome. And we tested so far 240 bat swabs using this PCR to determine the pathogen load among treated and untreated sites. And the PCR results are very promising and showed a reduction in the fungal load and infection extent on beds at the treatment sites. And I will let Craig tell you more about this project and these results. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would be available for any question. Thank you.
And now we're going to stick with bats, and Greg Turner, our state mammologist, is going to give us a status update on white nose.
President Nick, commissioners, Director Burhans, and staff, thank you for your continued interest and support in our suite of diversity species. Today, I would like to provide a brief update on how Pennsylvania bats are doing. So, like everybody else out there, we were thrown a curveball in the last year with this virus that graced its presence upon us. And we have a few particular concerns when it comes to bats. And that's basically due to the fact that the bat species is projected as the origin for this virus. And so we can boil down those two concerns to, first, that we were very concerned in general that bats in North America could become a new reservoir for that species, for that virus, I should say. And should that happen, there are, of course, potential issues with human health in the future, as well as mutations that might occur within the bats, and some of these then reverberating back into humans. But of particular concern for us was whether or not this virus, if it got into our native species, would be an additive mortality factor for the bats. And the reason we were concerned about that is because when animals are stressed out and they have these dormant viruses in them, that can cause them to become active and also cause them to start shedding more virus, which would spread it around even greater amongst the other individuals. And if you think of this in the context of a bunch of bats, all in close proximity, clustering up in the hibernation zone and getting impacted by white nose syndrome and being highly stressed, this could very easily kick into a addition to the mortality or an additive mortality factor. And frankly, we just didn't want to find out if that was the case. It's much better to avoid this. I think everybody agreed about that. And there were a number of different federal recommendations that came out. One of the areas of focus for those recommendations was on rehabilitation facilities, where you have daily handling of bats by sometimes people who may be asymptomatic. So they came out with recommendations to prevent the release of those bats currently in the rehabilitation centers. These are bats that what we call being overwintered, and you can't release them until the spring comes and it warms up. And they also asked that we reduce or prohibit any new admissions of bats into those facilities so that we don't make that problem worse as well. We did that, of course, and we also worked, like many others, to reduce and prevent any other unneeded bat exposures where it was feasible. So not providing permits to scientific research or to contractors for development reasons. We found alternative ways to do some of that development work using acoustics, where you're not handling bats directly and things like that. As far as the rehab bats go, keeping bats long-term in these facilities is costly. It is not good for the individual bats. The longer they're there, the greater the chance of them being exposed truly is. There's a lot of other negatives associated with this. So the PGC ended up partnering with our Wildlife Futures group. You just heard about this PCR test that Dr. Anise just spoke of. This development of this test and validation of this test was really key for us, as it allowed us to determine whether or not these bats were actively infected and shedding virus. And it provided us a good scientific ground to stand on to safely authorize the release of those bats when they were tested negative. And in fact, with Pennsylvania, we tested those bats twice a month apart, just to confirm and be extra cautious that those bats truly were negative. The real threat to bats, of course, is white nose syndrome, as it has been for the last decade. We confirmed white nose syndrome in the 2008-9 winter in Pennsylvania, and we documented a 98% overall mortality, although within that, there are different levels of mortality for the species. So 4 of those species in particular have mortality rates in excess of 95%. And when sites get contaminated, mortality is swift. Typically, we see the vast majority of those bats die within 1 year. And sometimes we have a little bit of slow mortality levels the second and third year that we're able to detect, but it's pretty swift. And this pathogen spread across the state rather rapidly. Within 5 years, or by 2012, we considered it to be statewide. And this is pretty much where we seem to have hit rock bottom as far as our populations go. Following that, in 2012, for this suite of sites that I'm representing here, this is an aggregation of about 30 different hibernation sites that we monitor more routinely, both before and after white nose syndrome, with multiple visits after white nose syndrome. These are sort of the best sites, if you will. And in these best sites, we started to notice a slight uptick after 2012. It's not great, but it is an uptick, and we're happy that we're going in this direction versus the other. But among this group of sites, it's important to note that the vast majority of these sites are actually not increasing. They're just kind of hovering in the single digits, most of these. The increase that we saw was 1,522 bats. So when you zoom in a little bit more, the scale has obviously changed, but we're seeing this little increase. And we're noting that the survivors are really selecting these super cold sites. This is something we've talked about in the past and something we've published And what we really think is happening is that little brown bats are gregarious. And so you have a couple survivors, one from over here, 5 over here, and a few up here, and they want to be together. And they're going to pick the site that is best for them to be at and aggregate at that site. And so what we end up with, even though most of the sites are declining, about 90% of that growth, about 1,300 of those 1,500 bats, are coming from these 2 sites. So Canoe Creek and Woodward Cave are these 2 sites. And these sites are growing almost exponentially at this point. And that's wonderful news in some regards. These sites are protected. One is on public land and one is on private land, but they're both gated and they're both super cold. And they fit the model of exactly what we've been thinking with these survivors. There is an air of caution, of course, that we have all of our eggs in one basket, if you will, or maybe all of our bats in 2 baskets would be more appropriate. But this is a pretty rare thing right here to see a graph like this. I know of just a few other sites in New York State where we're seeing bat numbers growing at this kind of a rate. And everywhere else in the nation is a different story when it comes to the survivors out there. But in picking these colder hibernation sites, there's 2 benefits to that, really. The first one's a physiological one, that the bats deploy routinely in order to alter how long they're in hibernation. So the colder it is, the longer they can stay in that state of hibernation. And all species that hibernate have these temporary exits from hibernation where they warm their body back up and they turn their metabolism back on. And that action accounts for probably about 80% or more of their entire winter stores. So the less they do of that, the more energy they save. And the colder they select, the colder roost they select, the less they do of it, so the more energy they save. The secondary benefit associated with that is basically because the pathogen has a slower growth the closer you get to freezing. And so as these bats, these survivors, are picking colder places, the pathogen is growing slower. And I'd like to point you to the 3rd month of this study. We did a 3-month study. Keep in mind, hibernation is actually 6 months. But what this is showing us specifically is that bats around 5 degrees centigrade have significantly less infection at month 3 than bats that are at 8, 9 degrees centigrade. And if you consider this more of an exponential growth of fungus and wounds on the bat, as that goes up, month 4 is going to be worse than month 3, 5 worse than 4. So if we can slow that down by having colder sites, we're theoretically going to have much less disease severity. So this is what we were hypothesizing back in 2015, right when we were first noticing survivors picking these colder sites. And so we did a little experiment here with our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service partners, the Partners Program. We went in and figured out where the old historic opening was for this site. It was about 40 to 50 feet down, buried in the ground. They dug straight down, creating this big sinkhole for us until they hit that opening and gated it. And what we wanted to know was, could we take this site that is basically at this point kind of useless for bats? It's almost a death trap. It's so warm and has very few bats. Can we turn this into something good, was the question. And can we do that by cooling it? And we successfully cooled this over 10 degrees Fahrenheit. We dropped this down close to that 40-degree mark and a little bit below it at times, which is right where we want to be. And the question then was, well, will the bats find it and start using it? And so in 2016 winter, that was the first winter that cold air was able to start getting in there. So the bats that had entered and used it didn't know it was going to be opened and getting colder. So that was really the bottom for this site. We hit 7 little brown bats that year. down from 11 the year before. And almost immediately within the following year, I think we went up to 28 bats. So it basically quadrupled in number. And from that point on, we've basically seen increases in both species diversity as well as total abundance. So we're pleased with the way this has been going and trying to get the idea that we want more baskets out there across the state housing our bats. We're working on making more of these sites. We currently have 5 sites that we're working on. This is a slow process. It's very tedious and time consuming to organize and orchestrate lots of this type of work. It's very novel type stuff. But what we're doing here in this picture, we created a giant wall, if you will, a thermal barrier to help capture that cold air. This is the Dunbar site, one of the 2. And then at a couple other sites where we have, the problem isn't necessarily capturing and holding the cold air, it's that we're not getting enough in. And so we're going to be drilling some holes to vent the heat out. That'll help draw the cold air in the winter to a level above what's currently happening. And then in a couple others, we're simply just making larger and more openings, trying to get more airflow into those sites. So as we keep working on these, we keep getting them a little bit colder, and we're getting them into a place now already that bats are starting to flock to these. We're seeing increased numbers and diversity, even though we're still technically trying to get them where we want them to be. So we're very excited that we think with this, we have a first management tool to apply. And if we can combine that with this technique, I think we're going to be in an even better place. But for now, this is the second technique that we've been working on. This is an environmental treatment that we do in the summer when the bats aren't there, so we're not causing any disturbances. And what we're doing is we're coating the roost environment with a substance called polyethylene glycol 8000, or PEG for short. And PEG is a ubiquitous substance. It's non-toxic to all mammals. It's FDA approved for human consumption. And when the spores of this fungus that are in this site during the summer, waiting for those bats to come back, when they get sprayed and covered with this, it basically inactivates them, making them act as though they are water stressed, which just prevents germination. And the hypothesis of this technique is really that we're trying to benefit and delay exposure to those bats that are going in first. And the bats that enter hibernation first are our adult reproductive females and the young. And so those bats are in there longer than, say, the males. And so they're getting more and more infection than the males were actually getting, and having higher mortality, we think. So this is kind of targeting those bats. And if it does accurately, this will, in the long term, have some potential ramifications for benefiting true recovery, survival of those juveniles, and recruitment into the population. So the big aspect of this that we were asked to include was looking at non-targets. And so we examined bacteria, fungi, invertebrates, and small vertebrates at these sites. And we are happy to report that our substance had no significant non-target impacts. And we definitely had no negative impacts to the bat species as well. In fact, we recorded annual increases to the little brown bats. So we are now at a record high number of little brown bats. And if you compare this to the other sites I discussed where we see a lot of immigration coming in, we're not quite seeing that here yet. This looks a bit more like potentially a lot more recovery, a lot more recruitment than immigration, because it's much slower. So we're quite pleased that we have a potential second technique here, as I mentioned. And to quantify how it's treating the little brown bats, in this graph, if you look at the blue line, which is our treated site, versus the other two, which are our control sites, we were able to reduce disease severity in little brown bats by an averaged 65% over those 2 years. And that's super exciting. We're really pleased with that. The other aspect of this is that we did not reduce how many little brown bats got infected. We still saw 100% of the little browns get some level of infection. Even though it's very minor, we're actually kind of pleased with that because our goal was not to eliminate disease and halt the whole process of evolving resistance. We want these bats to actually have some small level of infection and to deal with it, but we just want them to live through it so that we can get the species on its own 2 feet and able to then spread out to other sites. And we think we're getting there with this. We're expanding it to see if this will have similar results in other sites. So we now have 3 treated sites in this study. And if all goes well, in the future, we may be trying to combine this with some of our cooled sites. And so for that, I thank you for your interest and your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them at a future date.
All right. That concludes the bat portion. Now we have David Stainbrook. He is our deer and elk section supervisor, and he will be discussing the proposed antlerless deer license allocations.
Good morning. I'm David Stainbrook, the Deer and Elk Section Supervisor. And today I will be going over the goals and the objectives that we use for deer management and how that leads to the recommended antlerless allocations for this next season. The Game Commission has publicly identified and supported deer management goals. These guide us in making our antlerless license allocation recommendations. These include a healthy and sustainable deer population, acceptable levels of deer-human conflicts, a healthy and sustainable forest habitat, to provide recreational opportunities, and to improve information and education. These goals are supported by both Pennsylvania hunters and the broader public in Pennsylvania. Our deer management goals and data determine our deer population objective for each wildlife management unit. For the goal of managing deer for a sustainable population, we look at fawn to doe ratios from our harvest data. We look at population trends, and we look at disease, such as the presence of chronic wasting disease and free-ranging deer in each of our wildlife management units. For the goal of managing deer for sustainable forests, we look at data on forest regeneration and deer forest impacts. These are collected by the U.S. Forest Service each year. And for the goal of acceptable deer-human conflicts, we ask how many deer do people want using data collected by a third-party survey company. In total, we look at over 750,000 data points each year and work through a defined decision process to determine if goals are being met and to determine the deer population objective, which is either to increase, decrease, or stabilize the deer population. And we do this in each and every wildlife management unit. So our deer management recommendations are based on a defined process. First, we evaluate if our deer management goals that I just went over are being met in each of our management units. Then we determine the recommended deer population objectives for each of those units, whether to increase, decrease, or stabilize deer numbers in that unit. Then once we've determined our population objective and identified that, we can then determine the number of antlerless deer that need to be harvested to meet that objective in each of those units. And because antlerless harvests, and more specifically the females, have the greatest effect on the deer population, this is the change that we do every year. And then finally, we determine how many antlerless licenses are needed to be allocated in each of these units, factoring past success rates. So this can change from year to year, even if the objectives stay the same. So going through some of the data, first is our deer population trend data. And what we see here are that deer populations are stable in most of our management units. That is shown here as the light green in our map. In units 2F, 2H, and 3D, we see an increasing population trend as indicated in the dark green color. And in unit 4B, we see a decreasing trend indicated as the red color. Additionally, we look at fawn to doe ratios from the harvest, and in the units where you see the black angled lines, those are units where we're seeing a decrease in the fawn to doe ratio from the harvest data. However, we do not see it affecting the population trends in any of these units. All of those have stable deer populations, except for unit 4B, which does have the decreasing population trend, but that is on purpose. That's by design, because the objective there in that unit was to reduce deer numbers because of chronic wasting disease. And regarding chronic wasting disease, in all of the units where we've detected CWD in our wild deer, our deer population plan objective is to reduce deer numbers in all of those units where we have identified CWD in those wild deer. These are indicated as the red areas on this map on the right. And lowering deer populations in these units is a critical step to decrease the disease risk and the spread. The next measure we look at is forest health. So forest regeneration and deer impacts, they do vary across the state, but in general, most of the units are considered good to fair for regeneration on the left and acceptable levels of forest impact on the right. These are indicated in the light green to dark green areas on both of these maps. Again, these measures are collected by the U.S. Forest Service. For the forest regeneration on the left, we actually have a few units, 1A, 2F, 3B, and 4A, that are considered good for regeneration. That's where over 70% of the plots have adequate regeneration, and that's highlighted as the dark green. And in management unit 2A, which is the red unit on the left map, the forest regeneration was considered poor. And in this case, less than 50% of the plots had adequate regeneration. And then the remaining management units, forest regeneration was only considered fair. For deer forest impacts on the right, they were considered acceptable, which is moderate impacts or below. And all of our units, except for 3D and 4E, indicated on the right, the units in red. These were where deer impacts were considered too high, above moderate levels. And going back to the one on the left, although 2A had poor regeneration, what you see on the right is that the deer impacts were not considered too high. For the goal of acceptable deer-human conflicts, we rely on data collected from PA residents by a third-party survey company. And the results from this show that most residents consider the deer population just right. So it's a bland map when you're looking at it. Basically, everything is light green across all of our management units. And that's because we're using that threshold level of most residents, or above the 50% level or so. When we start to look at that same information at a lower threshold, say 25%, we start to see more variation across the state with more highs and more lows. It's not that light green color everywhere. One of the things to note, the one on the left is a map of the survey data from 2011, and the one on the right is the most recent survey data from 2019. One of the things we're noticing is these responses have changed over time, so that we see more and more of our residents are considering the deer populations too high. So it's shifting from more of the dark green on the left to less of the dark green on the right, more red, more of the light green on the right. So what does this mean? It means that from the perspective of Pennsylvania residents, deer populations have increased over the last decade. This is also supported by the increasing deer harvest during the same time, is an index of that population growth throughout that time frame. However, when we look at a survey of deer hunters specifically, using the same questions, it indicates that most deer hunters consistently want more deer, and that more than 25% of the hunters said deer populations were too low in every single one of the wildlife management units. And this is pretty consistent across all of the past surveys that we've conducted with deer hunters. All right, so I just went through all of the goals and all of the data that we use to determine if we are meeting those goals. The next step is to move through this, what looks like a complicated decision tree. It's outlined in our deer management plan, but basically it's just the step-by-step process to determine the deer population objective for each of our units. And so basically for each one of our wildlife management units, we step through this decision tree using the goals and data that we just went through. And that, essentially you result in your objective, and that's whether to increase deer numbers, decrease deer numbers, or stabilize the deer numbers in each of our wildlife management units. So when we go through that process for each of our units, it leads to the following summary map here. And so you can see here that the objective is to stabilize deer populations in most of our wildlife management units, but the objective is to reduce deer populations in 9 of our wildlife management units. The 8 in the South Central region are because of CWD concerns, and then the 2 in the Northeast, units 4E and 3D. These are both ones where we were seeing forest impacts, and actually 4E has both forest impacts and has CWD now. So now that we've defined our recommended objectives for the population, the next step is to determine how many antlerless licenses are needed to achieve those objectives in each one of our management units. And so this is the final slide of the presentation. It shows on the far right, this shows last year's allocation with this year's recommended allocations based on the deer management plan objectives and the goals. The units in red text are the same from the previous map. Those are the units that the objective was to reduce the population, and the rest are to stabilize. Additionally, we have 13 management units that are changing from 7 days concurrent to 14 days concurrent, and you will see the allocation has been adjusted to account for those added days. This typically leads to reduction from the previous year. However, in a few of the units, the recommended allocation is not a reduction from last year. And this is because either of the need to stabilize an increasing population, an objective to reduce populations because of chronic waste and disease or forest impacts, or from other factors. And you'll also see in some of the areas where we are recommending stabilizing deer numbers that the allocations may increase or decrease from last year. And those really depend on a few factors such as the population trend, if the average antlerless harvest has changed, and if the number of antlerless licenses to harvest an antlerless deer has changed. That concludes my summary, and thank you for your time. And I'm happy to address any questions that you may have now or at a later point in time. Thank you.
And now, excuse me, now we will move into Jeremy Banfield. He is our elk biologist, and he is going to speak about the proposed elk license allocations.
Commissioners, our executive staff, and any members of the public who may be listening in today. My name is Jeremy Banfield. I'm the elk biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I only have 2 main topics that I'll be covering with the board today, and one, the update on our annual population estimate, and then more importantly will be the 2021 hunting licenses for the upcoming season. So starting off here with the annual population estimate, just a quick reminder, beginning in 2020, we started using an aerial-based survey. And so this is a double prop fixed wing aircraft, and then mounted to the belly of the plane is an MX-10 camera. The camera is fairly sophisticated. It has infrared capabilities, as well as high definition color imagery for daytime use, and it's fully integrated with the aircraft. So you can see here, all these overlays are a combination of where the plane is and then where the camera is looking. And what that does is it improves detection of elk, and then it also allows the plane to fly higher and faster than traditional aircraft. The survey area includes the portions of the elk range that are occupied. This map looks somewhat congested, so I'm just going to walk through it. The outer black line is the elk management area. Moving in from there, the kind of pale green color is the elk hunt zones, and then the pink outline is the actual survey area. And again, that's where the elk are primarily. The black lines that you see overlaid on top of that are the actual flight paths of the plane, and they based out of DuBois for the majority of this, but then as they moved eastward, they would use the University Park Airport as well. The black lines are 500 meters apart, so you get pretty good coverage, and it equated to about 1.5 million acres, so 1,500,000 acres, and it takes almost 95 hours, and it's just over 10,000 miles of flying. The green dots that you see here are the locations of the groups that were observed during the 2021 survey. There were 80 different groups, and that added up to 880 individuals. And so that 880 is really a minimum count. We know that there's at least 880 individual elk, But more importantly, how do we know how many elk were missed during the survey, and how do we then calculate an overall estimate? Well, we have to use the radio collars to do that. And how this works is if we know where a radio collared elk was at or very near the time that the plane flew overhead, which is the blue or pink dots here, blue for bulls, pink for cows. And we also know where the location of each observed group is. That means that the plane flew overhead, saw a group, and they marked down the latitude, longitude of that group. We can simply compare these two things after the fact. So, for example, if a bull was at a certain location at a certain time, and then the plane flew over and saw a group of bulls at that same spot at the same time, then we can say that animal was observed or it was seen by the plane. In contrast, if we know where an elk was at a specific place on the landscape and the plane flew right past without seeing it, then we know that that animal was missed. And keep in mind that the flight crew here, the individuals on the plane, they have no knowledge of where the collared elk are. They don't know which ones are collared and which ones are not. So 78 radio collared elk were available for observation during the 2021 survey. The plane and the flight crew saw 46 of them, so that gives us a detection rate of 59%. That detection rate combined with the number of individuals observed is then pushed through a mark recapture formula, and that provides us with the estimate you see here. So 1480 was the 2021 estimate, and the error bars are ranging from about 1270 to 1800. Compare that with the 2020 estimate of 1339, error bars ranging from about 1150 to 1640. And this is good, right? There's still probably some subtle growth going on, but in general, the error bars between the years overlap heavily, and the estimate is reasonably consistent. And then I should also mention that in 2020, our detection rate was 65%, which is fairly close to the 2021 detection rate of 59%. How does that compare with our historical numbers? Well, from 2008 to 2018, we used a ground-based minimum count, and it is exactly that. We know we had at least 920 elk in 2018, for example, but we also know that there were more elk than that out there. Compare that to the aerial survey from the past couple years, and now we're talking about an actual estimate of the overall population. So it's definitely better, in my opinion, but just realize that an estimate will always come with some variation, and that variability is reflected in the error bars that you see around each estimate there. Okay, that was the whirlwind update of the current population. Let's shift gears and talk about the 2021 proposed licenses. Elk licenses are split up in 3 ways. First by sex, bulls and cows, then by season. Early archery is the last 2 weeks of September. General firearm is the first week of November. And then the late season is the first week of January, which for this year will be January 2022. From there, the tags are separated geographically by hunt zone. And there are 14 different hunt zones, but zone 1 is open to anybody. And zone 7 has an allocation of 0 because it surrounds the Elk Country Visitor Center. So really it's 2 through 6, 8 through 14 are the true distribution of the tags there. 187 total is the recommendation for this year, and I will run through how we will get to those numbers. Fairly confident the board already knows this, but just so I've said it, the driving forces behind the elk licenses are 1, the population by hunt zone, and then 2, the frequency, or you might say intensity, of elk-related conflicts. And those conflicts often fall into 2 categories of agriculture and vehicle collisions, but they do not always fall into those categories. Our goal here is to first stabilize the population, and we do that by taking the current estimate and projecting it forward, using the birth rates, using the survival rates, and then using the known harvest rate as well. And second goal is to minimize those elk-human conflicts. And we do that by reviewing the number of crop kills, road kills, nuisance complaints at the hunt zone level, and then adjusting the tags in an effort to reduce the number of elk in those areas of high conflict. And this step really relies heavily on the local game wardens. They have a sense of how people feel about elk in their respective districts. And so the numbers being proposed today include input and adjustments from the local game wardens as well. That brings us back to this point, 187 total, 56 bulls and 131 cows. If we compare that to last year, and if you look at the table on the left here, I have the totals broken down by hunt zone. And increases that we are gonna propose is zones 5, 12, and 13. These are primarily due to increases in agricultural conflicts, and with the exception of zone 12, that was really more motivated by an increasing population there. Decreases that I would highlight, there's really only one, and even then we're only talking about a marginal decrease, but zone 3, generally speaking, is mostly public land. Those elk do not get into too many conflicts and don't bother too many people, so we're not really hurting anything by reducing the allocation in that zone. All the other zones are basically the same, within 2 to 3 licenses of the previous year. The last thing I do want to comment on here is that a lot of those increases are on the antlered category. So 36 in 2020, and now we're recommending 56 in 2021. The main reasons for this are twofold. And first, we had a noticeable increase in agricultural conflicts, and the majority of those involved groups of bulls. And the second driver here is an increasing bull to cow ratio. So again, if you remember what we talked about before, the aerial survey has only been used for 2 years now. And prior to that, we used a ground-based roadside minimum count. And you can see the numbers here are on average about 30 to 31 bulls per 100 cow using that minimum ground-based count. And now using our aerial method, we've increased to around 50 and even the mid 60s this past year. So it's not entirely surprising that we're seeing some differences between the two methodologies here. I will say that using the aerial survey, I'm pretty confident that there are more bulls out there than we originally were able to detect using the minimum count. And so we're trying to incrementally increase the bull harvest and draw that ratio back down to somewhere around the 30 to 40 branch bulls per 100 cow. Just to put that ratio in perspective, if we look at bull to cow ratios nationally across the United States, a heavily hunted population in some of the western states can be as low as 10 per 100 cow. In contrast, national parks where there is no hunting at all, it's not uncommon to see between 50, even 60 per 100 cow. And so again, we're shooting for that 30 to 40 range, but we want to move toward that incrementally and slowly over the next several years. And so that's what you're seeing reflected in those changes between 2020 and 2021. And with that, I will take any questions. I thank the board for their attention and their time today.
Now we are going to move on to Nate Huck. He is our waterfowl and dove program specialist. He's going to give us an overview of the proposed migratory game bird season selections.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nate Huck, and I am the Waterfowl and Dove Program Specialist within the Bureau of Wildlife Management. Today, I'll be discussing our proposed 2021-22 waterfowl seasons and 3 new waterfowl initiatives. I'd like to point out that waterfowl season selections occur outside the board's formal voting process. Since this is my first presentation to the board, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce myself. I started with the Game Commission in September of 2019. Originally, I am from central Wisconsin, and I received my bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I then received my master's degree from Texas A&M University Kingsville. Prior to coming to Pennsylvania, I spent 4 years as the migratory game bird biologist for Wyoming. Jumping into season setting, I'll quickly cover the separate process for waterfowl season setting. Ultimately, waterfowl are under federal authority, and states can provide input through the flyway councils. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides frameworks which sets the maximum season length and bag limits for each species, the earliest and latest allowable opening and closing dates, and the allowable number of segments and splits within the overall season. The state-level process starts with a comprehensive waterfowl survey, the most recent survey being conducted in 2020. In the survey, we asked about various hunter preferences for season structure. We used the information from that survey to develop proposed seasons within the frameworks. We directed hunters to send comments on these proposed seasons to the dedicated waterfowl comments email. In the photo, you can see a snapshot from the Facebook Live that we held in the middle of the comment period. During the Facebook Live, we addressed changes from the past seasons that were proposed or required by federal frameworks, as well as addressed common questions we had received in the waterfowl comments email and comments received during the Facebook Live. Over 29,000 people viewed the Facebook Live, and we received 82 emails to the Waterfowl Comments email. Taking the input gained from the public through the Waterfowl Comments email about the season proposals, Bureau of Wildlife Management staff adjusted our proposed season selections, which were then circulated to the commissioners and staff for review and comment. After changes arising from the review are incorporated, the executive director signs an official season selection letter, which is sent to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the seasons are published in the Hunting and Trapping Digest. I'm going to briefly address the mallard bag limit. This is a graph some of you have probably seen before. Mallard populations have been steadily declining in the Northeast US, the blue line, for the past 20 years. Pennsylvania breeding population decreased by about 50% over that same time frame. There are probably multiple factors leading to the decline, but according to potential take analysis, a total bag limit of 2 daily is what the population can sustain. Therefore, under federal frameworks for the 2019-20 season, mallard bag limits in the Atlantic Flyway were reduced from 4 total, of which 2 could be hens, to 2 total, of which 1 can be a hen. That same season restriction continues under the 2021-22 frameworks. A new framework change we see is in relation to the Atlantic population of Canada geese. This population breeds in the subarctic region of northern Quebec and are a significant portion of the goose harvest in the Chesapeake Bay region, as well as portions of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and New England. Due to a series of late springs in the subarctic breeding grounds over the past decade, including a near total reproductive failure in 2018, that population has declined significantly. As a result, under federal frameworks, regular season lengths and bag limits in the Atlantic population harvest zones in the Atlantic Flyway, these dark brown areas you can see here on the map, were reduced for the 2019-20 season. Due to harvest rates not dropping low enough and concerns from the states in the Chesapeake Bay area, the bag limit in all AP zones are required to drop to 1 a day in 2021 and 22 season. It's important to note that for times and places where AP geese are not present, seasons are not affected. So the September season remains unchanged statewide, and the regular seasons are not affected in other harvest zones. On this next slide I am presenting, we can see a schematic for our proposed duck seasons. This is just to give a general idea of how we shifted seasons in the Northwest and South zones. The lighter green bars on top were last year's seasons, and the darker blue bars below are this year's proposed seasons. As a reminder, these are proposed changes are a result of hunter preferences from our surveys and public comment. In the Northwest zone, we shifted a week from the back half of the first segment to the end of the second segment. In the South zone, we are proposing 2 changes. First, to move up the first segment 1 week to open Northwest, North, and South zones all on the same day. The second change shifts the whole second segment of the South zone back 1 week. Here is a similar graphic to the last on proposed goose seasons. These changes again are also a result of public preferences and comments. The first is in the resident population zone. We are proposing shifting the third segment of the season back 1 week, as many hunters expressed an interest in hunting the last week of February. The other is in the Atlantic population zone, also shifting the second segment back 1 week to align better with changes made to the South Zone duck season. This slide will present our last proposed change for the 2021-22 waterfowl seasons. Early in 2019, states were given the opportunity to provide 2 additional days of opportunity for active duty military and veterans, similar to youth days in that they can be over and above the 60 days of regular duck season and can vary by zone. They can be concurrent with the youth days or separate. Last year, we chose to take one of those 2 days concurrent with the second youth day in each zone. In 2021-22, we are proposing to select both of the days for active duty military and veterans. We would continue to have one statewide youth day in mid to late September, this year on September 25th, and then an overlapping youth and active duty military and veterans day, which will either be right before the regular season in the Lake Erie zone or during the split in the other 3 zones, and then an active duty military and veterans only day the Saturday following the seasons in all zones. With that, I'm going to take a few minutes to deviate from waterfowl seasons to discuss some new initiatives we have coming up. First, we will be doing a resident Canada goose movement study. We will be marking a large number of Canada geese at Middle Creek and Pymatuning with the collars you can see in the photo on the right. As many of you know, one of the management priorities for Middle Creek and Pymatuning is for Canada geese and goose hunting. This project aims to better inform habitat management on these game lands, as well as inform managers on how the birds respond to hunting pressure, with a goal of ultimately making hunters more successful. These collars collect location data from the birds up to every 5 to 10 minutes and use cell service to upload the data. In the photo on the left, you can see what the data looks like. This is a bird that we marked at Pymatuning. After molting, the bird spent a few days near Youngstown, Ohio, before flying south to central West Virginia. The bird remained there for about a month before it was shot by a first-time hunter. The second study is one looking at migration ecology and demographics of eastern mallards. This is a flyway-wide project with plans to mark hundreds of female mallards with similar transmitters, but these are worn on the back like a backpack, similar to the one seen on the female American black duck in the photo on the left. We aim to measure reproductive metrics such as nesting attempts and success, estimate survival rates, and quantify movements and habitat use throughout the year. As I mentioned, mallards are declining. We are hoping the results of this project will help to better inform mallard management in the flyway and provide insight into the mallard decline. In the center, you can see the data from one of the American black ducks we marked this year at Middle Creek. 2 weeks ago, the bird left Middle Creek and took about a day to arrive in Ontario. It spent a few days there before moving north again. At this time, it is farther north than any other black duck marked this winter. We expect to collect similar data on mallards. The last initiative is a Gamelands wetland inventory. This project is a cooperative effort between the Bureau of Wildlife Management, Wildlife Habitat Management, and Automated Technology Services. With this project, we aim to map and record all managed wetlands on Gamelands, create a database of the associated infrastructure, and record the condition of wetlands and infrastructure as well as the current management activities. We hope that this project will help to better inform wetland management on Gamelands. With that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I will take any questions on the proposed waterfowl seasons and bag limits or the new waterfowl initiatives that you may have.
All right, now we're going to move on to grouse. And Lisa Williams, our grouse biologist, is going to give us an update on the state bird.
Hello, I'm Lisa Williams. Today I'm going to provide a management update on the rough grouse program. It's been a very busy year with some exciting developments that I'm eager to share with you. So we'll get started. Today I'm going to update you on grouse population status and season setting, our management priorities within the Bureau of Wildlife Management program, and research and management collaborations that we've started with other partners. In terms of our grouse population status, grouse populations remain low statewide. We're seeing a slight recovery in our fall-winter surveys. We've seen a 23% increase in flushes per hour since 2018. And some hunters reported that their local covers were producing really high numbers of birds, but we aren't yet seeing that at the statewide scale. We're not seeing that large scale recovery that we keep hoping for. Our summer populations also remain low. In our summer survey, we're still seeing a lack of real recovery. We all know it takes grouse chicks to make grouse. So unless we start to see real recovery in these summer numbers, we can't really expect to see a large population increase when we head out in the fall. So we need to focus on creating secure nesting, cover, and brood cover when we're putting habitat on the landscape, and in order to bring these numbers up where we want them to be. So my 2021 season recommendation, as you know, remains the same as recent years with no late season. And that's due to that lack of real recovery in the statewide population, both summer and winter numbers. The good news is that hunters are likely to get 2 additional hunt days in the fall, pending approval of those Sunday hunting dates. So that will be 2 additional opportunities to pursue grouse. Remember that our adaptive season setting goal is to increase baseline populations by moving more birds into the breeding season. This adaptive season setting relies on grouse numbers to tell us what the season should be from year to year. And Pennsylvania is the only state that has tried this approach with grouse. We are continuing each year to monitor the impact and see if this adaptive season setting is getting us what we want in terms of increased baseline population. To do that, I compare grouse abundance in northern Pennsylvania and southern New York. And you can see up until 2017, those 2 indexes of grouse abundance tracked very closely together, almost identical between Pennsylvania here in the blue and New York here in the orange. So really close agreement in grouse abundance year after year up until 2017. In 2017, Pennsylvania instituted that new adaptive season approach, and that resulted in a more conservative grouse season. And here you can see what the response has been since that year. You do see the Pennsylvania numbers slowly pulling away and improving relative to New York. And this is the question that we have. Is this a real trend? Are we going to continue to see this year after year as we move forward with this adaptive harvest framework? It'll take time before we know if this is a real trend. So I'll continue to be tracking this situation and keeping you apprised of what we're finding. Moving on to other management priorities. I said before, it takes grouse to make grouse, but those original grouse populations need to have high quality and highly abundant habitat in order to thrive. So we developed, we really need to focus our habitat effort where grouse are most protected from West Nile virus. You know, in the past year, we developed this GPAS tool, which shows disease risk across the landscape in terms of moderate disease risk in orange, low risk in blue, and really minimal disease risk in purple. And from a recovery perspective, that shows us the good, better, and best places to make our habitat investments. We also need to focus habitat effort where grouse are most vulnerable, where the populations are most vulnerable. And this map shows you the locations of those most vulnerable grouse populations. These are the ones that are more isolated or are rapidly declining. They're kind of at the edge of the range in Pennsylvania, and these are the ones that we are most concerned about right now. So these are 2 tools developed in the last year to help us guide habitat management. Our goal all along has been to use these planning tools to guide habitat management to the best locations. We don't have time to waste, so we really need to prioritize where we want to make our investments. This approach of using planning tools to guide our habitat efforts really paid off last month when we collaborated on a large outreach effort with the state NRCS office. Our private lands program developed a strong message about how creating young forests would benefit grouse and other species, and how it would also benefit forest health. We then sent this letter to forest landowners that lived in those priority GPAST areas and had land that supported those vulnerable grouse populations. So layering those planning tools on top of one another, we identified 10,000 landowners who really could play a critical role in improving conditions for grouse and other young forest species. We sent 10,000 letters out, and they were directed to contact their county NRCS office for assistance. And the response has been overwhelming. It was a very compelling letter and a compelling outreach effort for grouse management. We're also continuing our effort to understand the role of West Nile in grouse declines. This is the pattern that's emerging. You can see grouse population trends going back decades. In yellow, you see moderate disease years. In red, you see severe West Nile virus years. And you can see that the disease is suppressing grouse populations during those moderate to severe years. But when the disease recedes into the background, like it did in the mid-2000s, and like it has done the past 2 years, you do start to see grouse respond and recover. And again, that's why we really want to focus habitat away from disease, because when they're not experiencing those disease losses, grouse remain a very productive bird, and their populations will recover if they're not facing those losses. So that really fueled the development of those planning tools. In terms of new collaborations, as we try to unravel the full impacts of West Nile virus on grouse, we now have new allies in the form of the Wildlife Futures Program. We have collaborative projects going on in Pennsylvania and beyond Pennsylvania. We're working on field studies across states to look at West Nile virus risk modeling, essentially looking at GPAST and how it might apply to other states. We were involved in a laboratory study to develop a better test for West Nile virus in live and dead birds. And we're working on 2 manuscripts to really get our findings into the literature so that other researchers, managers, and other states can benefit from what we're finding. You can see here it's a combination of field study and laboratory study in these collaborations, and that really capitalizes on the greatest strengths of the Game Commission in terms of field work and Wildlife Futures in terms of the laboratory and disease expertise. So this has been a great collaboration. We're excited to continue. And finally, management collaboration that's new this year. We began coordinating a working group across state lines to focus on regional grouse recovery. So in August of 2020, we created the Eastern Grouse Working Group. We've been meeting monthly to look for common priorities and issues across state lines that we can all work on together instead of everyone working independently. We've made significant amount of progress to date. We have updated the range-wide Eastern Grouse Range population status so that we all have a sense of how grouse are doing across these states. We've developed strategic planning workshops to get priorities across states for these Eastern grouse, and we've used that to develop a really basic roadmap to recovery. So again, all states are sort of pulling together instead of working independently or in worst case, competing with one another for resources. Speaking of resources, we are pursuing funding opportunities to get these ideas off the desk and onto the ground for the benefit of grouse. As I said, it's been a busy year with a lot of exciting developments, and I sincerely thank the board and Pennsylvania grouse hunters for your continued support as we work to recover the King of Thunder. Thank you.
And last but not least, for staff presentations, we have Travis Pugh, the Enforcement Division Chief. He's going to provide an overview of the Deputy Game Warden Program.
Good afternoon. My name is Travis Pugh, and I am Chief of the Game Commission's Enforcement Division, which is part of the Bureau of Wildlife Protection. And one of my responsibilities as the Enforcement Division Chief is oversight of the Game Commission's Deputy Game Warden Program. and I have been asked today to provide a briefing for you about the Deputy Game Warden program and everything that it entails. The Game Commission's Deputy program has been in existence since 1903 and plays a critical role in wildlife conservation and protection in Pennsylvania. Their commitment and level of dedication cannot be called into question, as they submit themselves to an extensive training program, purchase much of their own equipment, and face the same dangers that full-time salaried game wardens face for little or no pay. In addition to traditional law enforcement duties, Game Commission deputies teach hunter-trapper education classes, service wildlife-human conflicts, participate in wildlife management research projects, speak at various civic engagements such as schools and sportsmen's clubs, and generally act as local representatives of the agency. A deputy candidate's initial training begins with a 20-hour ride-along process with a full-time warden so they can gauge whether or not they are truly interested in the job, and this also provides an opportunity for the warden to get to know the candidate and decide if they should advance in the process. This ride-along can occur at any time throughout the year, but special emphasis is placed on the fall season when most hunting regulation enforcement and poaching interdiction occurs. They are then scheduled for a basic written examination that covers topics such as grammar, mathematics, comprehension, wildlife natural history, and Pennsylvania hunting regulations. After passing the exam, they may continue ride-along status, and they are scheduled for a weekend of training where they receive 16 hours of formal instruction in the Game and Wildlife Code from seasoned wardens under the direction of a regional law enforcement supervisor. Then they are forwarded several online training modules to complete at their convenience and are scheduled for one 6-hour pre-firearms training day where they are introduced to the agency's duty pistol and patrol shotgun. Deputies purchase their own duty weapons, and this gives agency's instructors an opportunity to inspect them. The next phase of their training is the Resident Deputy Basic Training course, which is hosted at the Game Commission's Ross Leffler School of Conservation, or RLSC. This course is 93 hours in length and begins on a Saturday morning, culminating on a Sunday afternoon, 9 days later. During that time, they are provided introductory training in all of the primary topics of the law enforcement profession, as well as all of the aspects of the Commission's responsibilities, including wildlife and habitat management, hunter access, and educational programs. They are also subjected to the rigorous and physically demanding environment of the full-time RLSC Academy. This includes morning physical training, cleaning details, and after-hours assignments. The process is tiring, to say the least, but it is also rewarding in that you get to spend time with like-minded individuals who are there on their own accord and are working hard at the process of becoming part of the agency and the team. The physical and academic demands are such that at its conclusion, graduates feel a sense of accomplishment for their hard work and are ready to move on to their next level of certification. When they leave the academy, they are provided with a study guide to help them reference the material that was presented to them during the previous months. They are scheduled for a final 205-question comprehensive examination. In addition, they are scheduled for one of the final firearms training days with regional level instructors, where they complete the same standard training and qualification courses of fire as a regular commissioned warden. When they pass the exam, they receive a commission as a probationary deputy state game warden and are assigned to work under the direction of a full-time warden in whose district they reside. In effect, the district warden becomes a field training officer, or FTO, for the probationary deputy for the next year while they complete an on-the-job, or OJT, training process. During that calendar year, the probationary deputy must complete a minimum of 80 hours of ride-along with their FTO while completing the OJT checklist. After 40 of the required 80 hours, the probationary deputy may work as a partner with a senior commissioned deputy that is specifically designated by the FTO, but the time spent does not count towards the minimum 80 spent with the FTO. In most cases, the requirements are easily met, as the new deputy is usually enthusiastic about the process. Probationary deputies receive 2 performance reviews during this time. The first is at 6 months, and the second is at the conclusion of their probationary year, when they can be either recommended for regular status or their probation may be extended for an additional 6 months. This does happen from time to time and is usually related to the probationary deputy not having completed their OJT checklist or not having spent enough time working in the field for the district warden to feel comfortable signing off on their commission. Dismissal is an option, but it's rare. If dismissal were justified, then it's likely that it would have already occurred by then. Game Commission deputies receive the same annual in-service training as full-time wardens, and once commissioned, train side by side with them in firearms, defense and control tactics, verbal communication skills, legal updates, first aid, CPR and AED, taser, and other elective topics. The process from start to finish is quite extensive and at times takes 2 or more years to complete. A permanent status deputy game warden must work 100 hours of law enforcement patrol annually, in addition to other public outreach requirements. This model has been in place for more than 20 years, although there were some minor improvements after a legislative inquiry in the late 1990s. Deputy game wardens have similar authority to a full-time warden in that they enforce the Game and Wildlife Code, the Fish and Boat Code, state park, state forest rules and regulations, and any other environmental matters. They cannot enforce the Crimes Code, Vehicle Code, or drug laws as full-time wardens do. They are very effective at supplementing and enhancing our ability to respond for calls for service. Some key points to note are the Pennsylvania Game Commission currently has 265 deputy game wardens. Increased demands on the agency and its wardens will continue to justify the existence of a corps of well-trained deputies to supplement the field force. The agency has an interest in maintaining a positive image with the public, the state legislature, and the criminal justice system in general. Deputies have an interest in being well-trained, making them less susceptible to assault, injury, and civil lawsuits. In closing, deputies play an integral role in our agency's strategic plan and are often found on the front lines of wildlife protection, acting as agency representatives to the public and the criminal justice community. Although there are a few college students and retirees, most have regular full-time jobs and family commitments and do the work of a deputy on their own time and at their own expense. They do receive a stipend of $80 per workday when there is money available in the budget, but it is not guaranteed to them. In most cases, with equipment purchases and gas money, they end up spending more than they make. Despite that burden, their level of commitment remains high. They are invaluable members of our conservation team, what we refer to as the thin green line. Thank you.
That concludes our staff presentations today, and I believe the board will now take some time to ask any questions they may have of our staff. So commissioners and staff members, you can now unmute as needed. All right, it seems like maybe we don't have any questions at the moment. So if we need to take them up later, I guess we can do that. I'm now going to turn the lead over to Brad Bechtel. The board's going to take up its prepared agenda. So Brad, how about you go ahead and unmute, and I will switch the screen over here.
Thank you, Lori. The board's formal agenda begins with the call to order by the president.
I'd like to bring to order this April 10th, 2021 Game Commission meeting. Madam Secretary, would you call roll, please?
Commissioner Knick,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitrick, Commissioner Mitrick, are you present? Commissioner Schnepp-Geiger, present. Commissioner Foradora.
Here.
Commissioner Fox.
Here.
Commissioner Fredericks.
Here.
Commissioner Layton.
Here.
Commissioner Mitrick,
He may be having trouble with audio. I do see that he is in attendance.
We have a quorum.
Mr. President, there is a quorum present if you want to continue with approval of the minutes.
At this time, I'd like to get a motion to approve the January 23rd, 2021 minutes.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Madam Secretary, would you please call a roll?
Commissioner Knick,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitrick, Commissioner Schnepf-Geiger's president, Commissioner Fordora,
Yes.
Commissioner Fox, Commissioner Fredericks,
Yes.
Commissioner Layton.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Moving on to the Bureau of Administrative Services, the first item concerns adopted rulemaking to amend 58 PA Code, Section 143.1, and add Section 143.5A relating to definitions and digital licenses to define and authorize the use of hunting and fur taking e-licenses. This authorization will also extend to certain permits similarly sold through the PAL system, such as mentored permits, bobcat permits, range permits, etc. The text is shown on pages 3 and 4 of your agenda.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Madam Secretary, would you call? Yes, go ahead.
Commissioners, if I may interrupt, there is a floor amendment that has been proposed by staff for page 4 regarding internet license sales. If the commission desires to introduce that, wants to have a motion and second, Mr. Raup could discuss what the purpose of that is, if that would be all right.
So moved.
We have a second. Second. Madam Secretary, will you call the vote?
Mr. Raup was going to explain that.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. This amendment, and I'll go ahead and display it on the screen here, is an addition of the highlighted text, and it is the result of comments received on this proposal that update with this additional provision that is necessary to be included in this rulemaking to avoid this section falling out of harmony with each other. Future form and legality approval of this rulemaking is contingent upon the preferred proffered floor amendment text that is highlighted in yellow on your screen. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have, but quite honestly, this additional text is only to harmonize the existing proposal with the existing text found in 143.11 so that those sections match each other in operation.
Any other comments on the amendment?
Any other comments on the amendment? We have a motion on the amendment.
We do, sir.
It's already been done. We got a motion in a second.
All right. Madam Secretary, would you call for the vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. So with the amendment, we would have comments and vote then on the actual adopted rulemaking itself that has been moved and seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
The next item before the commission is to amend, it appears on page 5 of your agenda. Yes.
Brad, Commissioner Metrick is on the phone and he can't hear us.
I can't hear you. I'm on. I'm
Okay.
live.
All right. The next item is on page 5 of your agenda. This is to amend 58 PA Code, sections 143.45 and 143.52 relating to completing and submitting applications and procedure for unlimited antlerless licenses, to authorize unlimited over-the-counter sales of antlerless licenses in any open or unexhausted wildlife management unit on the second Monday in September until these quotas are exhausted. The text is shown on page 6 of your agenda.
Move to accept.
Second.
Madam Secretary, will you call the vote, please? Or any comments, please?
This is Commissioner Schnepp Geiger. I'd like to make a motion to amend this, and I understand that there has been a floor amendment prepared.
Second the motion for the floor amendment.
We call for the vote, Madam Secretary?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
With the acceptance of the amendment, we would then be ready to have comment and vote on the item in the agenda.
No
Do we have a
discussion. I
motion?
move to accept.
Do we have a second?
It's already been moved and seconded.
Call for a vote, Madam Secretary?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Moving on in the agenda to page 7 of your agenda, this item comes from the Bureau of Wildlife Management, concerns proposed rulemaking to amend 58 PA Code, section 141.62. Beaver and otter trappers are currently limited to using no more than 5 traps or snares, and no more than 2 devices may be body gripping traps in any wildlife management unit during an open otter trapping season. This regulation was originally developed to minimize the chance of a trapper exceeding the season bag limit of 1 otter in a day. The limitation on the number of beaver traps extends for 5 additional consecutive days after the close of the otter season. The 5-day extension was put in place to allow for an otter trapping season extension if warranted. No otter trapping seasons have been extended since the first season was established during 2015. Longer trapping seasons, rather than year-specific season extensions, will be proposed by the Commission in areas where more otters can be trapped sustainably. The Commission is proposing to amend Section 141.62 relating to beaver and otter trapping to eliminate the restriction on the number of traps that beaver trappers can set during the 5-day period after the closure of the otter trapping seasons. The text of this proposal is shown on pages 7 and 8 of your agenda.
Move to accept.
Second.
Any comments? no comments heard. Madam Secretary, would you call for the vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. And moving to page 9 of the agenda, this concerns adopted rulemaking to amend 58 PA Code Section 139.4 relating to seasons and bag limits for the license year to provide updated seasons and bag limits for the 2021 through 2022 license year. The 2021 through 2022 seasons and bag limits have been amended to reflect current available scientific data, population and harvest records, field surveys, and professional staff observations, as well as recommendations received from staff, organized sporting groups, members of the agricultural community, and others interested in the management of the wildlife resources of this Commonwealth. The text is shown on pages 10 through 19 of your agenda.
We have a motion.
I believe that there's a floor amendment for page 7.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Any comment?
We need to make
For
a
the-
motion.
So moved.
Yeah, for the benefit of, thank you.
Second. All right. Any comments?
Page by page.
I believe there's a floor amendment for pages 17 and
Can we go
18.
page by page? Any comments on page 10? Any comments on page 11? Any comments on page 12? Any comments on page 13? Any comments on page 14? Any comments on page 15? Any comments on page 16? How about any comments on page 17?
Mr. President, this is Matthew Schnoop, Bureau Director, Wildlife Management Bureau. We do have a floor amendment on page 17. The amendment adds Saturday, November 27th and Sunday, November 28th to the 2021 bear season with no changes to the end dates. This change applies to the 4 WMUs where the extended season runs until December 11th and the 12 WMUs where the extended season runs until December the 4th. The intent of this is to make the season more consistent with its historic structure, simplify regulations, and provide additional opportunities.
Move to accept the floor amendment for page 17.
Second that.
We have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Page 18.
Mr. President, this is Matthew again. So we have another one on this page as well. The amendment corrects a formatting error in the preliminary approval seasons. So the hunting for the 4 species is allowed day or night during their open season, except during the overlap with firearms deer season when they may be hunted only at night. On the January agenda, the season dates were inadvertently formatted in a way that would have closed night hunting for these fur bearers during the firearms season. The floor amendment will correct the error to achieve the original intent, so no change to the season structure for these fur bearers except for opening 3 Sundays, November 14th, 21, and 28 to hunting. Hunting would continue to be allowed day or night for most of the season and only at night during the overlap with firearm deer.
Motion to accept the floor amendment on page 18.
I'll second that motion.
We have a roll call on that motion, Madam Secretary?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Page 19. Can we call for a vote? Madam Secretary, and
All
season
in
and
favor?
bags?
All in favor of seasons and bags up through page 19?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
I'll go along with all except the concurrent doe season. I have to go against that one. So it's a no. Motion passed.
Thank you. The next item of your agenda appears on page 20. It is to amend 58 PA Code, section 147.673, relating to eligibility and application for DMAP, to make July 1st the deadline for DMAP applications. The text is shown on page 21 of your agenda.
Motion to accept.
Motion. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Secretary, would you call for the vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And moving on to page 22 of your agenda, the next item is to amend 58 PA Code, section 141.45, relating to turkey, to eliminate the use of rifles during the fall turkey season. The text is shown on page 23 of your agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. President, if I could. This is Commissioner Lake. This has been a decision that's been most difficult for me. After talking to several hunters, I realized that we're taking away almost a culture from some of these people that are rifle hunters in the fall turkey season. However, I do kind of take some comfort in talking to one of the hunters who said to me, basically, if you take rifles away from us, we're still going to be able to kill turkeys. So without eliminating this season and providing them the opportunity to hunt with shotguns, at least for now, until we can see what the data actually spells out as far as what the kill is with rifles in the fall turkey season, I have to go along with this and support it. We had some other options. I know Commissioner Schnepp-Geiger had come up with some ideas that we kind of ran through our legal department, and we weren't able to do anything with them right now because they were just kind of too big of a change. So as of now, if our options are either to eliminate the season or to allow people to go out hunt with shotguns, I have to go along with the opportunity to hunt and just make this tough decision to eliminate rifles during that fall season. Thank you.
This is Commissioner
Layton,
Mittrick.
Thank you, Commissioner Layton.
This is Commissioner
Any
Mittrick.
other comments?
I'd like to say something. I think a lot of our hunters felt that we were doing this for safety purposes, so that people wouldn't be shot with rifles. But the truth of the matter is, this is strictly to help improve the population of the turkeys. It was not ever discussed because of a safety issue with the rifles.
This is Commissioner Schnepp-Geiger. I'd also like to add in there that the main objective that we're looking at is reducing hen harvest in the fall. at a time when hen harvest is an additive mortality to a species that is declining across a lot of the Commonwealth. So this decision, while it doesn't sit well with every Pennsylvania hunter, and can be argued that we took some opportunity away from folks who truly value their tradition of fall turkey hunting, the larger grand scheme of things is that we're able to keep the fall season open and offer rifle hunters an alternative implement, such as a shotgun, to still pursue the game that they would like to pursue within the resource and what it will sustain and what it will allow hunters here in the Commonwealth.
This is Commissioner Mitrick again. I want to say one other thing. Some people feel that this is going to be a permanent elimination of rifles during the fall turkey season. That's not necessarily true. The board fully intends on reviewing this and seeing what the data shows after 2 or 3 years, and we'll look at this hard again. Thank you.
Any other comments? Madam Secretary, could you call for a vote, please?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. The next item comes from the Bureau of Wildlife Protection and appears on page 24 of your agenda. It concerns proposed rulemaking to amend 58 PA Code sections 131.2 and 141.1. Section 141.1 relating to special regulations areas currently provides a general restriction prohibiting the use of single projectile firearms and possession of single projectile ammunition while hunting game or wildlife within areas designated as special regulations areas. The section thereafter provides a multitude of exceptions for various firearms and their associated ammunition. These firearm and ammunition restrictions are intended to address safety-related concerns in the predominantly urban and developed areas of the Commonwealth. This general firearm restriction serves as an effective ban on the use of firearms that utilize straight-walled cartridges. The Commission has determined that these firearms afford no greater risk of safety in the special regulation areas than currently exempted shotguns and muzzleloading firearms. The Commission has also determined that a reorganization of Section 141.1 is necessary to address its unwieldy and confusing structure. The Commission is proposing to amend Sections 131.2 and 141.1 to define and authorize the use of firearms that utilize straight-walled cartridges within most areas designated as special regulation areas, and also reorganize Section 141.1 to provide a clearer and more seamless construction within the section itself and with related arms and ammunition provisions. The text is shown on pages 24 through 27 of your agenda.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
This is Commissioner Fredericks. I'd like to greatly thank our Bureau of Law Enforcement folks. I know they spent a lot of time on this, weeding their way through all these regulations, and resulted in improved opportunity and recreational use of firearms for our hunters, and dramatically simplified our regulations for special regulations there. So a shout out to our Bureau of Law Enforcement and Jason Dukoski for working their way through this. Good job.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Fredericks. Madam Secretary, would you call the vote, please?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And moving on to page 28 of your agenda, there is a proposal to amend 58 PA Code section 147.804. Since the mentored hunting program's initial inception in 2006, the program has gradually grown and expanded to allow the hunting of many additional species of game and wildlife. With each progressive expansion of species eligibility, the mentored hunting program has come into closer alignment to the Commission's traditional hunting license structures. The Commission is now proposing to amend Section 147.804 relating to general to expand species eligibility for the mentored hunting program to include participation in waterfowl, bear, and expanded spring or special turkey seasons. Existing regulatory structures will authorize mentored youth over 7 years of age at the time of application and mentored adults to make application for bear licenses and special wild turkey licenses as a direct applicant. Mentored youth under the age of 7 years of age at the time of application will be authorized to receive the harvest tags from bear and special wild turkey licenses by transfer from a mentor in a similar fashion to other big game harvest tags. The text is shown on pages 28 and 29 of your agenda.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Madam Secretary, will you call the vote, please?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And on page 30 of your agenda, there is adopted rulemaking to amend 58 PA Code sections 141.4 to replace the current hunting hours table and migratory bird hunting hours table to accurately reflect the dates and hours of legal hunting for the 2021 through 2022 hunting trapping license year. The text is shown on pages 31 through 33 of your agenda.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? None heard. Madam Secretary, will you call the vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Moving to page 34 of your agenda, there's a proposal to amend sections 143.203, 143.203A, and 143.206 relating to random drawing elk licenses, special elk conservation license, elk auction license, and validity of elk licenses, and to add sections 139.18 and 143.203B relating to elk management area and hunt zones, and special license fundraiser elk license to define the elk management area and elk hunt zones, better delineate and describe the 3 available elk licenses, and lastly, close all elk hunting in any elk hunt zone that does not receive an allocation for a given hunting license year. The text is shown on pages 35 through 38 of your agenda.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Any discussion? With none heard, Madam Secretary, will you call the vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
With that, we'll move to the Bureau of Wildlife Habitat Management on page 40 of your agenda. This concerns real estate and an acquisition, contract number L3779, state game land number 148 in Lawrence County. Joseph A. Schweikert and Bonnie L. Schweikert are offering 12 plus or minus acres of land in Shenango Township, Lawrence County, adjoining property donated from the estate of Mary Joan Pavlich and approved by the Board of Game Commissioners at the January 29, 2019 Commission meeting. This is shown on Exhibit Red 1 on page 41 of your agenda. The option price is $30,000 lump sum to be paid with funds from the Game Commission's restricted account, other cost-sharing funds. Access is from Denny Drive, T 429 and from Cochrane Hill Road, which is an abandoned township road.
We have a motion.
Motion to accept.
We have a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary, will you call the vote, please?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Moving to page 42 of your agenda is contract number L3780, state game land number 141 in Carbon County. Marianne Krusliski is offering 6.38 plus or minus acres of land in Nesquehoning Borough, Carbon County, and interior in state game land number 141, as shown on Exhibit Red 2 on page 43 of your agenda. The option price is $30,000 lump sum to be paid with funds from the game fund. The parcel is located within an existing state game land, and therefore the commission may exceed $400 per acre under section 705B of the Game and Wildlife Code. Access is from SR 93 or Hunter Street.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second? We have a
Second.
Any comments? Madam Secretary, will you call for a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And moving to page 44 of your agenda, there's an exchange, contract number L3781, state game land number 44 in Elk County. Matthew J. Deemer is offering to exchange 1 plus or minus acre of land in Spring Creek Township, Elk County, an interior within state game land number 44, to the commission in exchange for 0.29 more or less acres of state game land number 44 in Spring Creek Township, Elk County, both as shown on Exhibit Red 3 on page 45 of your agenda. This exchange will resolve an encroachment upon state game land number 44 from Mr. Deemer's camp. Access to the 1 acre parcel is from existing state game land number 44. The proposed exchange is in the best interest of the commission.
Motion.
Second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary, will you call the vote, please?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And commissioners, that completes the formal written part of the agenda. We would move to other new business. I just want to remind the commissioners that the antlerless allocations and the elk allocations are traditionally part of this meeting that would be voted upon under new business during this meeting.
So, Mr. President, this is Commissioner Layton. So I would like to make a motion that we accept the antlerless allocations for white-tailed deer as they were presented by the staff.
Second.
Any discussions? Comments? Madam Secretary, would you call for a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. President, again, this is Commissioner Layton. I would like to offer up that we accept the elk allocations as they were presented by staff.
Second.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, would you call a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mr. President, Commissioner Layton, one more time. I would like to call on Dr. Matthew Snoop, who's the Director of Wildlife Management, and I would like for him to talk to us just for a minute or two to give us an update on CWD in the state. Dr. Snoop.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Layton. This is Matthew. So we had a busy year, as you well know. We have our response plan implementation. We have had a lot of successes this past year. We've been able to roll out our visualization dashboard where folks can view the data. Our turnaround time went down to days rather than weeks for samples submitted by hunters. Got great collaboration with Department of Agriculture. We've done some great new research with our CWD detection dogs. Our optimization of surveillance and management tools through the Wildlife Futures program has really taken off. And then our outreach, our collaboration with the National Deer Alliance has been a great product-driven relationship. Our new marketing bureau has done a great job working with them to put out some region meetings that we hope to get out in front of folks this next month, and basically let them know how we did. Let them follow up and make sure that they know how we've done as an agency and how much we appreciate the support that the hunters and the general public have given us during this process. So that's the good, and I think there is a lot of good, and I'm really proud to be part of all that good stuff. But there's also, unfortunately, some pretty dire issues at hand as well. So we were one of the states that were able to maintain surveillance during this past year. So we collected over 12,000 samples with the support of agency staff and the hunters. And unfortunately, out of those 12,000 samples, 218 were positive. That's up, but really where that focus comes down to is in our established area, which everybody knows is that initial area that's basically become the Blair, Bedford, Huntington, and Fulton County area. And unfortunately, last year in that established area, we had a sampling prevalence of about 7.6%. So still high, concerning, obviously. We've done a lot to try to manage that, as I just mentioned. But unfortunately, we jumped up to 13.8% this year. And that was a real punch in the stomach, to be honest with you, and is a real grim reality check that we have to continue to work together to manage CWD. We see from other states that these numbers will continue to rise without some direct management. And so we ask the hunters, the general public, and the support of agency staff to continue, and so that we can manage this disease and make sure that the agency is doing everything we can to fight it. So thanks for bringing this up, Commissioner Layton, and happy to take any questions on that further or answer anything.
Thank you, Matthew. I would like to just make a statement, if I may. Today, more than ever, we must realize as hunters and outdoor enthusiasts that working together is crucial for the future of wildlife conservation here in Pennsylvania. The PGC has asked for help from sportsmen across the state for their help in managing CWD, which has become a larger problem every year. Conservation is a big word, and it's crucial that we all work together as one, using the best science on a statewide level. As we look back at 2020, the CWD incident rate increased once again in the established zone. Without PGC and hunters uniting efforts to combat this disease, the future and increase of CWD is imminent. The commissioners and the agency face a tremendous amount of resistance when it comes to CWD. In fact, almost half of the states are battling CWD. We need to show the whole country what being a Pennsylvanian hunter is all about. Our agency has been a leader in wildlife conservation efforts since its inception 125 years ago. We need your help more now than ever to unite and battle this disease together and cooperate to protect the future of our incredible wild white-tailed deer herd. I want to thank you for your support and thank you for being a Pennsylvania hunter. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Layton. Do we have any other comments? At this time, I would like to recognize Commissioner Fox, Charlie Fox. This will be his last meeting. Thank you, Charlie, for supporting this game commission and for all you've done for it. and it has been a pleasure to meet and serve with you.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to represent the sportsmen of Pennsylvania. And I thank you for your cooperation and all the board and the agency.
Charlie,
comments?
Charlie, this is Commissioner Fredericks. I'd like to thank you for your service to conservation throughout your lifetime. As much as we appreciate your service on the commission for the last 8 years, we all know that your commitment to sound conservation has been a lifetime passion of yours. And I want to thank you and congratulate you. And be well.
This is Commissioner Foradora. Thank you, Charlie, for your service, and I echo Commissioner Frederick's comments. Thank you, Charlie.
Commissioner Metrick and Charlie, I just want to say you'll be missed, and thank you so much for all you've done for the commission and for the state of Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania hunters.
This is Commissioner Schnepp-Geiger. I enjoyed working with you and picking your brain many a times and gaining knowledge from your wisdom. So I thank you for the mentor that you have become to me, and look forward to continuing our friendship even after you've completed your term here on the board. Thank you.
Charlie, it's Commissioner Layton. So there's not enough time to say everything that needs to be said about your service to the commission. But one of the things I just want to bring out is your love for the youth population in Pennsylvania and all that you've done for youth hunting. That is truly the future of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And I just want to thank you for your support. And nobody has any idea how much time you spend with the youth. And I just want to thank you for all the time you've dedicated to them and conservation in Pennsylvania. Thanks, my friend.
With that said, the next commissioner meeting will be July 23rd and 24th here in Harrisburg. And that will conclude this Pennsylvania Game Commission meeting. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes the meeting today. Again, this session has been recorded and we expect it to be uploaded to the Game Commission's YouTube channel early next week. On behalf of the board, the executive office, and the rest of the staff at the Game Commission, we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your weekend to join us. And we hope you're able to get outside and enjoy some of Pennsylvania's great outdoors.